Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Emma Woodthorpe, who's the SVP and Chief HR Officer at Mercury Systems. Welcome to the show, Emma. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Yeah, so as you know, my name's Emma Woodthorpe. As you can tell, I have a great Boston accent. I actually live just outside of Boston. People, obviously, I think I sound more American than I used to. So I'm originally from Bristol in the UK. Lived there, got a degree at Manchester University. And then in 2000, I made the decision to leave the UK. We were talking about Bristol earlier. I couldn't decide where else to live, didn't want to live in London, so decided to go extreme and move 5,000 miles to California because that was the next best thing.
Yeah, wow.
And so I was fortunate enough to be recruited by a startup company in Silicon Valley. And I even remember the day, January 29th, 2000, I turned up in San Francisco airport with 2 suitcases, having never met the company I was going to work for and having nowhere to live. And to be honest with you, it was one of the most courageous and one of the best things I have ever done. As obviously seen by the fact that 20 years later, I'm still in the US. And now I'm a Chief HR Officer of Mercury Systems. I've spent 20 years in HR and beyond. Believe it or not, I started my actual HR career as a temp desk recruiter who was pushing temporary truck drivers into companies. And I tell you, the contractor excuse manual for that is pretty large of why they don't want to go. So that's where I started. I started humble beginnings. I've been in large companies, small companies, and then 4 years ago came to Mercury Systems to help them on their growth journey, which we've been on for the last 4 years. We're public. We're a public traded company on the NASDAQ, and I think we have a great hyper growth story.
Yeah. Well, on that point then, because change transformation is in the DNA of your business, which I think when we first spoke was one of the reasons why this isn't as being as challenging as other organizations, because you're a business that as you described yourself, always experience hyper growth through serial acquisitions, right? And that's kind of led to the topic of today's show, which is talking about why does culture integration matter and how do you do it successfully? But just give everyone a bit of overview of the organization, acquisitions, and sort of context for everyone before we jump into that.
Yeah, so Mercury Systems is an electronics company. We support the defense and aerospace businesses. We are a company that 4 years ago was about 600 employees and about 200 million. I actually remember when I joined, the stock price was $23 and we had a market cap of about 800 million. Over the last, we work with the defense industry along the sensor chain and a lot in radar, memory storage, processing, secure server. That's kind of where we play. We've actually acquired since that point 11 companies now over the last 4 years. We're now over 2,000 employees. Our revenue is in the high 700s. Our market cap is now nearly $5 billion. And I think our stock closed yesterday at $89.
How you got shares when you joined?
Yeah.
That was my first thought of that. I was like, definitely Emma got some shares.
It was really interesting. When I joined my last company, people were saying, why are you going from a $5 billion company where you're VP of 2 divisions that are even bigger than Mercury Systems together? And my answer was, just watch, just wait and see. And then I'll call you in a couple of years and say, now do you get it? And I did. I called one of them and said, now do you get it? He went, oh, I get it now. What an amazing journey. And we're not stopping. I mean, our strategy is to continue to acquire. We're growing organically and inorganically. It's been our strategy all along, and we haven't changed that strategy. Obviously, now we're in a little bit of a lull with what's going on. But it's been an incredible journey. And the other thing around what we do, which is different to a lot of companies, is we fully integrate our acquisitions. So there is no their way, our way. There is no you can keep your systems over a period of a year, they are fully integrated into Mercury. And on day one, they're actually told, from now, you are Mercury. You are no longer what your old company was called. You are now Mercury, and we're going to work to bring you fully in. So that's that's different to how some other companies, we talked about some companies earlier, Microsoft owns, and they keep them separate to a certain extent. We don't do that.
That's why.
It is more challenging, but the power for us is in how our customers view us and the products we take to them and the solutions we provide through being one company. And the power of One Mercury has never shown up more than in the last 3 months in the crisis we've gone through. It would be more challenging to go through that if we had been separate companies.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump in straight in and talk about how you're managing culture integration, because that's really where most people fail when it comes to no, you can get all the technical things sorted out, the systems, the processes, but from a cultural perspective, if they've not got the buy-in, if then you haven't got a buy-in and you don't communicate clearly, it can be a disaster.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And so, we've learned a lot, I think, from our the acquisition. And before even the 11 we did in the last 4 years, there have been previous acquisitions along, and we're very continuous improvement. We're always looking at what did we do well, what do we need to do better next time. And certainly we've been on that journey over the last few years. I think one of the first ahas was we needed to be looking at cultural integration in the diligence. And so we needed to understand, even from in the diligence, through the questions we were asking of the management team and the management presentations, through the tours, to understand what we were actually purchasing and where we might be different. So in terms of command and control versus collaborative environments, did you have structure in place around how you gave feedback, performance, how you did teamwork, how you did training, how you ran your systems, to really understand how close or far they were from us to start with. And so one of the things we've discovered over time is we've got pretty good at that, to understand quite quickly what we've acquired up front. So once you've kind of got that, you know what your plan is, and you've got your playbooks, and then obviously now you're bringing them in. And what we found was we were very good at day one. So we were very good at, welcome to Mercury, here we are. Now let's get moving on the integration. Let's go. Let's go. Because the first thing on our culture statement is we get results, and we do. And one of the things that we realized is we were very, very good at all you talked about, the system integration, the policy integration. And then we started to get some feedback, which was, that's great, but you don't actually spend any time telling us who you are, or what you do, or how you work, or why your org structures why you go this way instead of the way we do. And so we took quite a lot of feedback about a year ago from a number of acquisitions, and realized we had great playbooks. We had a playbook for IT and for HR and for sales. We didn't have a cultural playbook. We weren't even focusing on how to integrate them culturally. And so we took a step back and said, we've missed something here. We've missed something in the change management around, first of all, how do we talk to them? How do we explain ourselves? How do we listen? We're so busy integrating. We weren't always listening to them. And I think the other thing that we realized, we were a $200 million company, and when we were acquiring when we were 200 million, we acquired a company, a part of a company was 150 million. So that was kind of a merger of equals. But at 800 million, when you're acquiring a $50 million company, and sometimes we do, with a big company, and I don't think we thought about that, of being that bigger company and how we could overwhelm. And so we've spent a lot of time building a 12-month cultural playbook that includes, first of all, the diligence assessment we've talked about.
And by the way, on that point, a lot of HR leaders aren't even included at that stage.
So that was the first thing. So when I came in, it was clear to me in diligence, originally HR hadn't been included. And I'd done acquisitions at a previous company. And the first thing I said is, we have to have HR in diligence. And in fact, one of the things that was also clear was what we had was diligence leaders and integration leaders. And so I changed that for HR. We have one HR leader for an acquisition that runs through diligence to integration. because at the handoff point, unless you have really, really, really detailed notes, and by the way, things can change right at the end of a deal negotiation, you miss things. You can miss agreements that were made in diligence, and then you don't get them done properly in integration, or you do them another way because you weren't aware. So we actually make sure one leader in HR follows the acquisition from diligence right through to integration, normally that's an HRBP, and then with our M&A HR manager behind them. So there's two of them, always knowing what's going on in the process. We're very involved now, not just in culture assessment, but in how total rewards is done, how we're going to bring them in. So we do a lot of that now in diligence before we even get to integration. One of the biggest changes and flips we made as I came in was that when I said, you've got to have us in there. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
And I think that was and then my second question, where's the playbooks? And we went, okay, we don't have solid playbooks. So we've also spent a lot of time across the company building those playbooks.
How crazy is that though, Emma? That you have all these playbooks, but we don't have a playbook for our people.
Yes, we recognized it. And this is where I say we're always continuous improving. It's very common. It's completely common. And I'm like, darn it, we made the mistake. I've seen other companies made. The difference is once we made the mistake, we realized the mistake, we fixed the mistake.
Exactly.
So, so we have the assessments, and now we have a 12-month from how we're going to basically accelerate leadership development for the leaders coming in. How do we get them into our development programs so they're learning about Mercury, they're hearing the nomenclature we use, and so they can take that back to their employees and start talking in the same language we talk to as Mercury. How do we have leaders go out and talk to them on a regular basis about who we are and be very intentional about those topics with the employees? We now do culture surveys within 4 weeks. The plan is to do culture surveys within a 4-week period of a company being acquired, so we understand truly from the employees what we acquired. So it's different to our engagement survey. It tells us where they are, and so we can see how far away on certain things or how close they are. So where do we need to spend our time on bringing them into our culture? And then from there we plan out what that year looks like. We do another assessment at 6 months, another assessment at 12 months. The other part of this, though, is there's your formal culture and then there's your informal. And so we've actually partnered, we're partnering right now to bring in a process that will actually get us to what's going on informally, who really are the decision makers, who really are the people that are at the heart of that company that we have to know about, because if we lose them, the whole structure breaks or we lose knowledge. So we're looking at the formal and the informal, and then we build our plan from there. One thing I've learned now, I've done more than 20 acquisitions in my career, and not one of them has been the same. So you have to be flexible. You have to have your playbooks, but you have to flex with what you're seeing. And being intentional about that cultural shifts is really, really important, and transparent communication and development of the leaders. If you don't get the leaders, you won't get the employees.
Wow, that was a lot to take in.
Yeah, I'm not passionate about this at all.
Yeah. What are some of the specific things that you do early on, first few weeks?
Yeah, so we haven't tended to close offices when we acquire. One of the reasons we have a great reputation actually as an acquirer in our industry is we take care of the employees. Employees are at the heart of everything we do. We're incredibly passionate about engagement and the culture and our employees. So we don't close sites immediately. We might over time as we look at the footprint.
Which it makes sense. I get it.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And often the strategic footprint, there's a reason in there. They're either next to a customer or something, or for another reason, or it's where we can get the talent. We've actually kept some sites in their places where we might have been able to merge these because they've given us a gateway into talent, access to talent we didn't already have. And so we strategically made decisions about not doing anything because it gives us a way of pulling talent for the rest of the company in. So we do think about that. So no, they are remote. They are on their own sites together. We've learned to put a Mercury person, if we can, on the site.
I was about to ask, how do you affect that culture change when you don't have anyone from Mercury Systems on site? So is that something that you've seen that needs to happen?
Yeah, so we have a designated integration leader to every acquisition. So they start in diligence as well. So they see from diligence, they learn in diligence right through to integration, and they're dedicated until the point we say this integration is done. And that could be 12 months, it could be 18 months, depending on the size of the acquisition. And they are on site, and they become that heart of basically helping that integration to come in. They can talk to on a daily basis our culture, our values, how we work. On bigger acquisitions, what we've also decided, and we haven't, as I said, we're in a lull right now, is we will likely put an HR integration leader on site. If it's multiple sites, we'll choose the key site and have them go beyond that site. The thing we have learned is very much along this is if you don't have someone who knows your culture, is a great ambassador for your culture on that site, it's much harder to integrate that company. So having your own people, especially people you know are very passionate about your culture and kind of live, breathe your culture every day, and having them be your leaders on that site. We've seen when we've done that we've accelerated the integration of those businesses.
I just want to jump in with a quick LinkedIn question. So someone asked, is there any concern about anonymity of the survey responses for the new employees because they may not trust your company yet, and the pool of responses are likely small, or maybe they're just saying what you want them to hear or what they think you want to hear?
It's a really good question. So our surveys are completely anonymous. We run them through Glint, which is a third-party tool. We have a threshold of even how many results, even in our own engagement surveys, before a manager can see results. So you have to have 4 or more respondents before anybody can see the results. So, as we're thinking, we rarely acquire a company that's got 4 people in it. We have done some of 10, but primarily we get it to 100 and 150. And we're very honest with them up front and say, look, this is why we want to know this. We want to understand so we can help you to integrate. We want to make sure we don't break you. We want to make sure we support you. So the upfront communication is so important. You can't just say, here's a survey. You have to explain why. And I think when we explain why, people we've tested this, tend to be quite honest with us. But yes, you have to have a certain threshold before we can see the results, because we do believe in anonymity, and we get some really great feedback. We can then see and go, okay, that's an area for us not to break. And that's an area for us to go look at more, because they're so far from us. How do we go about bringing them into fold and learning from them as well?
Thanks for the question. What about leadership, right? Because for all of this, none of this works without the leadership team backing this. How do you affect and measure change in leadership development, help your leaders, and obviously measure them in terms of what you expect from them?
Yeah, so this goes beyond just obviously acquisitions. It's something we've been on a journey on now for about the last 12 months. My CEO, who's very people-driven, very people-orientated, said, how do we measure the effectiveness and the success of our leaders across the company? How do we know if our development is working? How do they know what we want, what we're going to measure them against? And so we started talking to a number of other very innovative companies who have done a lot of work around manager effectiveness models and things like that. And we actually, over the last year, a cross-business and functional team has come together to build what we're calling our leadership success model. And this model identifies 9 areas. And by the way, one thing about this team, and they'll love this if they hear this, is they were all chosen very specifically to be on this team because they emulate the behaviors we want to see in our leaders in Mercury. They're all very successful leaders. They're people that, when we look at their engagement scores, they're the highest in the company. And we want to understand why. And so we asked them to come join us. So first of all, they could have input and talk about what is it they do that makes them so successful, but then help us create a model by which could be our true north around our leadership success. And so we've created that. We're in the process of rolling that out. That's great. You can have a great success model. You can say, this is what we're going to measure against. And by the way, we're going to measure you in this tool called Glint again. But you've got to train them. If you don't give them the opportunity to, first of all, understand where they're at, what they need to work on, and then develop them, if you lose them at the development. So we've actually put together, for our size company, we actually have what I'd say is a world-class leadership development framework that we've been working on, and we're in the process of accelerating. Managing at Mercury is our supervisor to manager program. Mercury Managers That Matter, which is our M3 program, is our manager, senior manager. We're about to bring out a new program called Leading with Purpose for our directors and above. And then we actually have a senior executive program, which we call Leadership Edge, which is for our senior directors up to our vice president level. So we've actually invested a lot in the plan and being very planful. Underlying that is the leadership success model. So at every stage, we're weaving in those pieces to say, okay, this is where we're going to develop on these behaviors that we expect to see at our director and senior director. So now you've got correlation from what we think is important as a company to what then the managers know they've got to develop too. Now they're getting development. And then through our engagement tool, in our engagement surveys, which we now do 6 monthly, we will have a series of questions which will actually be tied to the leadership success model, and will come together to give them a manager, a leader score. So now they can see.
You have the data to back it up now.
Yeah, so now you've got the metric for them to see and how they're doing. What if they're working on something, they can now see have they made improvement on that because they're getting the feedback, and also 360s as well. So we've spent a lot of time on this area because when you're in hyper growth, it's very easy to leave managers behind. It's very easy to say, no, we just got to keep growing. But if our managers and our leaders aren't developing with us, we've got a problem with scale. They won't be able to take on more. So we're very intentional about our leaders. What that means is when we get an acquisition, and what we've realized is we weren't able to put our acquired leaders in our programs for about a year because our programs were getting booked up. And so first of all, we decided we're going to put more programs on and run more programs through a year. And secondly, we decided that we're going to hold slots. So we weren't going to fill up every class. So going forward, we're actually going to hold 5 slots in every class. That as acquisitions come in, we can slot
We're
those.
gonna do it so often.
Yeah. And we can slot them in immediately because we haven't filled
So
every
important
class.
though to get them in there sooner. Waiting a year would just, you're missing an opportunity, aren't you?
You really are. And that was our biggest aha was, we had to get them to really, really be able to make this, successful in the culture. They get that enculturation from the way we do a lot of our development. And that was a big aha that we were waiting too long to put them in through it.
Mm-hmm. How do you hold your leaders accountable to be empathetic?
So helping and caring for each other is part of our cultural statement. So one thing about
There you go.
our cultural statement was actually built from what people had told us they loved about Mercury, and we needed to make sure we kept as we grew. We had some aspirational, but help and care for each other is right there. Now, we've had a lot of conversations about this topic over the last 3 months around empathy and kindness. And more than ever, that's needed right now, and how that shows up. And I would say one of the ways I think it's shown up is because as a senior leadership team, at the top, I would say 20 leaders in the company have all worked that way. We've worked very closely on how we're going to protect the health, safety, and livelihoods of every single employee we have. And we've got multiple programs in place to help them do that. And then we talk about this almost twice a week on how do we be empathetic to the situations? How do we make sure they feel flexible? We just built a pledge to say, look, here are the things we're committing to. No non-essential meetings after 2 on a Friday. Trying to finish meetings early. Not judging where you are, whether it be a home or work, wearing a mask at work and the type of mask versus what's going on behind you at home. And I think because of the actions and because of how we responded, I think it gave direction and kind of that freedom to our next levels down to go, okay, that's how we need to respond.
It's filtered down, right?
Yeah. And I think we responded very fast to the crisis. And we put a lot of things in place to make sure our employees were protected. We're very fortunate. We're deemed essential. Defense was deemed essential, both in the US and in Europe. We're not in Asia. And so we've been able to continue to work. That means we've had 40% of our people on our sites. And so making sure they feel protected, they feel safe. as well as the 60% who adjusted to working from home within 48 hours. And listening to what they need has been incredibly important.
You surveyed employees in terms of, do you want to return to work? What's the responses been? By the way,
I think
return to work, return to office. Everyone's still working.
We call it return to we call it return to the workplace.
Workplace, because no one stopped working. We had this conversation beforehand. I said to Emma before, everyone listening, Emma, I need half an hour break before we go live on LinkedIn because I'm working myself too hard. So there you go. There's no return to work. We're all working.
Exactly. And actually, I think across the board, even on a site or off a site, even harder now, because those connections and those collaborations are harder. Our employees have told us they're extremely grateful for what we've done. Many of them have told us they could work from home for longer if it was needed. A number have said, no, we need to come back to be productive. And we're actually working through what we're calling our next HG. And if just so those who are science people will have got that immediately.
I didn't get it.
I didn't. I had to ask. Periodic table sign for Mercury.
All right. Okay.
I work with engineers and
I can see.
And so so we have so what they've told us is they're happy. They are able to work longer, which we have asked them to do. They've also told us the things they need to feel safe, and our employees on the sites have told us as well. We didn't leave them out of this survey. We did what they need to feel safe for people to come back on site, and it is around PPE and social distancing and density and making sure we're balancing those three at the same time so that people do feel comfortable. But I will tell you, our employees haven't missed a beat. I've never been prouder. I've always been proud. I'm incredibly proud of what they've done over the last 3 to 4 months. I know how hard it's been, and they've not missed a beat. And it just shows you what people can do, and that maybe being in the same location isn't always needed. Although I think many would say there's a loss of connectivity and just that socialization.
People, I've got friends, Emma, that are like, can't wait. Like they're like, I really cannot wait. Only now they're realizing the social interaction, because you got to realize most people, their best friends are at work, and their social interactions revolve around the after work activities, just the friends and the bond that you build. People like cannot wait.
We've done a lot on that around mental health and wellness. We've shifted a lot to that. We had a phenomenal session with 2 well-known psychologists yesterday that we offered to everyone in the company and recorded around this topic. One of the things I think that's going to hit people, though, quite hard, especially in the US, I think it's a little different in other countries, depending on where the country is at. What our Swiss team is experienced, what our US team versus UK, Spain is different. And so first we have to acknowledge it's different by country. But one of the things, as I described to my team, I said, okay, you all want to go back, I know, but let me tell you what you're going back to. I said, you will not be able to sit together at lunch because you're going to have to social distance. Will be one to a table. You will have to wear a mask. We will have to move some of you because you may not be able to sit. You may be within 2 close quarters, so we may have to move you to another desk. I said, you will have to go up the elevator separately. You will have to actually stagger your lunch breaks differently. And I wasn't trying to be negative. I was trying to show a reality of there's this desperation to want to get back to that social aspect. And my worry is that people are going to be hit with loss for a second time.
They're like,
when they go back and find out they can't even get it then because it's so different. People on the sites have been in this for 3 months. They figured this out. They know what. I worry for the people at home. We want to get back desperately that socialization. It's not going to be there, and we're going to. Some of them will go through that loss. I think I'm one of them. I will go through that loss again of it's not what I thought it would be. The new normal for a while is still going to be very different.
Yeah, it's not the same, is it? I went to our office on the weekend just to check in, to make sure everything was okay, and I walked in, and it's like a WeWork type environment where there's like 200 offices in there, and I walked in, and it looked like a crime scene. I'm not even exaggerating. It had like black and yellow tape, like taped everywhere on the floor, so like that's where you walk, right? This is because you want a one-way system, but black and yellow tape, like literally like crime scene tape. It looked like that all day around the whole building, everywhere. Obviously, you know, one person in and out of the toilet at a time, screens everywhere. And I get all of this, by the way. I'm not complaining. Yeah, it needs to be there. But masks. And I was like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I'd rather be at home. So
yeah.
I was really excited about it, get to see the team again. Like what you're saying. So I completely understand. And I walked in that building and I was like, this isn't what it was before. This isn't the collaborative space and, you know, open environment that it was before. And it's a very different feeling. And it just didn't feel, I said to the team, let's just carry on working from home from now, because I don't think there's any benefit of us actually doing it, because we're only going to it's going to make it more difficult. I was saying to my wife recently, we went to see her family, and I said, you do realize that us going to see your family in the garden spaced out, it's actually going to make it harder for you, because it's going to show you the realization that they're right in front of you, but you can't go and give them that hug. And we did it, and exactly what happened. We came home and she was really upset. And I was like, look, because now it's like the realization it isn't what you thought it would be.
Yeah, there's a great article, HBR article called "That Discomfort You're Feeling is Grief." And they actually had a number of people reading it on the way out, because the loss of being at work, the loss of control, the loss of, you know, of having to be in your house and not being allowed, there was nowhere else to go. And I think it's one that people and managers, we actually shared it with our leaders, for that empathy question you asked at the beginning, is that person's not, you know, you look around and go, I don't get why that person is still going or thinking of going on that cruise or thinking of going on vacation, and they were getting mad. And I said, read this article and then see where they're at on their grief journey, because maybe they're in denial right now. They're not doing it to despite us, or they're struggling with this. This is a human struggle. And I said, and on the way back in, we're going to have the same struggle. People are going to feel that loss, and we have to continue to support and be empathetic. And you're going to have someone who wanted to come back in and goes, I can't do this. I just can't. I need to work from home, and we're going to have to figure it out with that person on what we're going to do. And that, I think, is something we've tried to do and strive to do through all of this, is to try and really understand the personal situations, so that we can help individually those people that really need it. And that's something that I think is incredibly important, and will be as we come back in. I know companies that aren't coming back for the rest of the year, but that's not possible for everybody.
There's so many things, more things we could talk about, but I'm conscious of time. But before I let you go, Emma, I just want to jump into our quick fire round. So I'm going to ask you like 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
No pressure then.
Yeah. Everyone's reaction to that is like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior HR executive?
So actually, I think the number one thing was holding me back, and this is very controversial, was being in the UK. I think the move to the US was actually the point at which I was in a little box. I don't like being in boxes. So when I moved to the US, suddenly I was able to be the person I think I was meant to be.
Well, you went from Bristol to Silicon Valley. It doesn't really get so I don't think that's
doesn't get much different than that.
I don't think that's controversial at all, and it's obviously clearly paid off. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
The best piece of business advice I ever received was to remain calm in a storm. So whatever is going on, however nervous you might be feeling, always look like you have it under control. It doesn't matter if you do or not. Always look like you have it under control. Because if people think it's under control, you're calm, and I'm not always good at this, people trust you, and people go, okay, she's not reacting, so we're okay. And so that was probably the best piece of business advice I got.
What's one book you'd recommend to audience, and why? Doesn't have to be HR.
Well, it has to be. So one of my favorite books of all time is Becoming by Michelle Obama. If you haven't read it, it's an amazing read. She's an amazing woman. And so that would probably be the book I would recommend.
Fantastic. And then can you share some internet resources you use to stay up to date with current events, or increase your own productivity? What's on the browser? What's the go-to?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, my go-to for news is the BBC.
Why not?
I find the BBC much more matter of fact. and much more kind of global thinking than maybe some of the US channels. So I actually still, I've now 20 years, go to the BBC as one resource. I do use the Worldometer to see what's going on with the coronavirus. I tend to look at that once a day just to see what's going on. It's a little different to the John Hopkins model. I've actually found for what we do, it's a little bit more accurate. Don't look at it more than once a day because it's depressing.
I was about to say that. I'm surprised. I thought you have to, given your role.
I have to give my role. I wouldn't recommend anybody else do that.
Yeah. If you don't have to look at it once a day, don't look at it once a day.
Right. I agree with that. And Headspace, Headspace has started to make it accessible. So Headspace has been a really big go-to for me. We actually provide it for all our company free of charge. But that's been, and I know Headspace has done some wonderful things in how they're offering it. So that Headspace is one of the apps I go to.
Amazing. And then last question, what's one thing about your business that you're most excited about?
Oh my gosh, it's the growth. I mean, the opportunity in front of us to continue to grow, to be a commercial model disrupting in the defense space, to continue to be this great company to come and work for and be acquired into. I really believe for us, the sky is the limit in what we do. And that's exciting. I left big companies for a reason and came to a small company to grow it. And the excitement of that. There's a challenge to it as well, but the excitement of that.
It's not easy, by the way. It seemed very easy today, Emma, all these integrations.
It's not easy. It's never easy. Your processor, you think you got a process that works for a $1 billion company, and you get there, go, shoot, it didn't work. Got to change it again. And there's no constant static, but it's also what I absolutely love. And I think the future for our company is incredibly bright in our space and what we do.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. It's been a real pleasure. Before we wrap up, if there's sort of one parting piece of advice you give to everyone, what would that be? And then where's the best place for everyone to connect with you if they want to reach out and say hello?
Yeah, so I think I would say one piece of advice, especially during this time, is don't be too hard on yourself. We're all trying to be teachers and parents and good citizens, and now we're also being asked to provide our opinions on what's going on in the world. Don't beat yourself up. Don't be too hard on yourself. We're all going through this together, and it's important when you do the things to stay sane and to keep yourself well. We will come out of this, absolutely, but we can't keep beating ourselves up for the stuff we can't get to or we feel we're failing at. Everyone's failing at something right now, but just think about what you're doing well and be grateful for those things you're able to do well and stop beating yourselves up. I see too much of that.
Yeah, especially now. I said to you before the show how I was struggling with to balance doing these shows with being a husband, CEO, dad, and something's going to give. We're not superhuman.
And what gave for me was my kids are on Xbox and PlayStation more than they've ever been.
I'm on Xbox with them now.
What? They're talking to their friends, and so I've got to be okay with that. I can't feel like I'm a failure because that's what they're doing. So just don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much again for everyone on LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. Appreciate it as always. If you're new here, please consider following me here on LinkedIn. You'll be notified next time we go live. If you're not subscribed to the HR Leaders podcast, head over to hrleaders.com/podcast. You can subscribe on your favorite platform. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you again soon, Emma. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.